So now, having learned the simple steps of crochet with slip stitch, double crochet and treble crochet, it's now important to look at how to read a pattern. So I've written this really simple pattern just to show you the first steps you need to look at. So beginning, you'll always be given a list of materials that you need, a bit like with a recipe, cooking recipe, where you're told what ingredients you need to use. And in this little one, we only have 3 things that we need to use, which are a small amount of the DK yarn, double knit yarn, the side of the hook, and then if there's anything else, in this case we need a darning needle for sewing in the ends. Below that, you will then be given a list of abbreviations for the crochet stitches, and again for this one we only have 3 stitches to look at. We've got chain, slip stitch and treble crochet, and when you look through the pattern, those abbreviations will keep being used. And then we start looking at the actual pattern. At the beginning, it'll tell you whether you are working in rows or going to be working in the round. And straight away, this only has 1 round. I can see this is going to be working in the round. So let's start with the base ring. So I've got my hook and I've got my double knit yarn, and I'm going to begin with a slip knot to join my yarn to my hook. And then it tells me to make a 5 chain. So let's begin with that. Looking at the chain there, remember, don't count from the loop over the actual hook, but count backwards from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I now need to join with a slip stitch into the first chain to form a ring. So with the tip of my hook, I'm going to go into the very first chain that I've made, all the way through, yarn on, bring that to the top, and then bring the hook through, and so I have 1 loop left, and there we have our ring made. It's always a little bit tricky because you'll see there's quite a big hole there, which is the first chain that we've gone into, so try not to use that now for the next step of the pattern. So we're now ready to work round 1, and it says chain 3, and here we've got one of those round brackets, and this is just to clarify what that actually means, and that is counting as my first treble stitch. This then is followed with working 2 trebles into the ring. So this is where it's important that you go into the actual ring that you've made, not into that chain that we made our slip stitch with. So to do a treble stitch, yarn on, into the ring, yarn on, bring it to the top, so we've got our 3 loops on our hook, yarn on through 2, yarn on through 2. So that's my first treble stitch made. I'm just going to pull it across over that little slip knot so it can cluster together with that 3 chain. So I need to do another one of those because it's asked me to do 2 trebles. Yarn on, into the ring, 3 loops on my hook, yarn on through 2, and then yarn on, so I have 1 loop left. So already you can see I've made my first petal, chain 3 followed by 2 treble stitches. So the pattern then says next work a slip stitch into the ring, and this is really just to bring the stitches down to make my first petal. So to do a slip stitch, I go straight into the ring, don't put the yarn on first, just straight in, yarn on, and straight away take the hook through there. So I'm now left with my slip stitch. I'm just going to move that thread out of the way, which is the tail end, which is getting in the way. So that's my first petal. Now it then says continue by working, and this is where we have a square bracket, and then I read the whole command: 3, chain 3, 2 trebles, 1 slip stitch, and I'm going to work all of those into the ring another 4 times. So in the end I'll have made 5 petals. So let's work through the first part of that bracket. Chain 3, then 2 trebles, and then a slip stitch. And that's my second petal. So that's one of 4 times, so I need to do it again. Chain 3, so I just keep repeating the bracket, and then 2 trebles, and each time I'm pulling them together so that the stitches all work as one cluster or one petal, and also it's giving me space on the ring to add my next group. So slip stitch again. So you can see now how this little motif is being worked. So I've got 3 petals, so I need to do 2 more petals. Chain 3, 2 trebles, and then slip stitch just to lock it in place, and I've got space just about, so I'm just pulling it round to do 1 more petal to make my 5th petal. Chain 3, 2 trebles, and then I need to finish with my slip stitch. And there we have our 5 petals made. So to finish, I need to fasten off by cutting off about 15 centimeters of wool or yarn from the main ball. So I'm going to do this by, I'm just going to use my eye, but I'm just going to make a nice long thread, snip that off, and then I'm just going to pass that through that final loop that I made and pull it nice and firm and tight, just so it won't undo. And in that way I can use that if I want to for hanging it, or I can now darn that in. So I'm now going to show you how to darn that in. In the middle you can see I've got quite a big hole, so I'm now going to show you the important thing of keeping these tails nice and long so that you can really tidy up your work. So with my darning needle, I've turned over my work to the wrong side, so it now looks quite bumpy, the stitches, and I'm going to thread my yarn. So I do that by folding it over double, then it's easier for threading through my tapestry needle. And I'm going to work into the back loops of that center ring. So just pulling that through, and I'm just working into those back loops, so not bringing the needle through to the front but just the back. And as I do that, I can gently pull that in so that that center ring becomes a little bit smaller and a little bit neater looking when I turn it over to the front. So just nearly all the way round. So you can see how by pulling that you can really tighten that center. When I turn it over, you can see how much neater that little center hole has become. So I'm just going to do 1 more back stitch on that just to really lock it in place. Then I can snip that off and my little daisy is finished.